Hi, my name is Mona Achan, Shrek. I have a hyphenated name. Me and my husband have been together since 2017. That's when we got married. I am 30 years old. I currently live in New Jersey in the United States, and I have a duplication of exons 2 through 7 on the T-SPAN7 gene. So it's crazy the timeline. Exactly 2 years ago, yesterday was the day that I found out I was pregnant. And 9 weeks into it, I had suffered a loss at 9 weeks gestation. And we ended up doing a DNC that led us to doing genetic testing and finding what everyone kept calling a variant of unknown significance. And as you can imagine, after having a loss like that and people throwing things at you like that and not really explaining what they mean, it gets a little bit frustrating. But I was able to meet with a genetics counselor in my area who was phenomenal and really broke it all down for me. After we had suffered the loss and they did the genetics testing and found this duplication in the baby, being that it was on the X chromosome, they tested the sex and found out that it was a male. So they then did further testing to find out if I was a carrier of this duplication or if it was just something that the baby ended up creating on their own, because apparently that's something that can happen. Essentially, most of the cases, there are unaffected mothers like myself who are perfectly healthy, normal, no disabilities, um, full full disclosure, I do have ADHD, but it's something that I've learned how to manage. So we don't know if it's something that came from the duplication. The way that my genetics counselor had explained it to me is as women, we have two X chromosomes. And because it's like a little tail on the X, this duplication, for women, there's more space. So it affects less in women, whereas males, when they carry the XY chromosomes, there's less space essentially for this duplication, and it affects more in males. So in some of the studies, it causes speech delays in girls, autism in both males and females. So it really can range, which is why they kept calling it an unknown significance, because there's really no set idea that, males are affected by this, females are affected of this. I am a special education teacher. And the only reason I did decide to go through IVF is because there was one case where there were twin boys who were 11 years old at the time. I don't remember what year it was. But these 11-year-old boys could not walk, could not talk. They were still in diapers. And as a special education teacher, it would mean me giving up my career to care for a child like that. And that was really the groundbreaking point that made my husband and I decide that we were going to go through IVF PGD testing. And that was a whole process in itself because it's never been tested before for women. There's so much unknown. I could have a baby girl that could have the gene. She could be perfectly normal, or she could be severely disabled. I could have a boy that could be perfectly normal, or he could be severely disabled, intellectually disabled, because there are some unaffected fathers. Personally, they gave me the option because this was something that they'd never seen before. The lab and the hospital gave me the option of testing two family members to see if they had the gene as well, because they just want to know more about it. Not that I didn't want to help, but they wanted to test my parents, and I didn't want to put that burden on my parents if I would have gotten the gene from them, for them to know that they're the reason that led me to where I am in this life. So I personally made that choice, not to test my family members. But you never know. It could be a possibility that, my father has it and he's unaffected, or my mother has it, she's unaffected. And I have two older brothers, you never know. But I didn't have the heart to do that to my parents, specifically my mom, because trying to be a mother myself, this is one of the reasons I'm going through IVF, is because I don't want my daughter to have to go through this in life and worry, is she going to have a child with severe disabilities? So not even having a child and knowing that I don't want to put that burden on my child, I could only imagine how my mother would feel if she was a carrier of the gene and she's the reason I have it. So after we had met with the genetic counselor, she gave us many options, and she said that we could try to do IVF with PGD testing. We could try surrogacy. We could try adoption. At the time, they didn't recommend us trying on our own just because it's so much unknown and we'd be going into the waters completely blindfolded. So we had different options. Not that I'm against adoption, um, but I want my child. I want to be able to look at a baby and see my features in them or see my husband's features in them. And if that was a possibility with going through IVF, then that was something that I was going to look into. We also talked about surrogacy, and it's going to sound selfish, but I want to feel baby kicks. I have never put my hand on any of my friends or my sister-in-law's stomachs to feel baby kicks, because if I do feel a baby kick, I want to feel it myself in my stomach. And this is just something that I've longed for so long, because my husband and I started July of 2019. So we tried on our own for a while, which resulted in the loss. And then we didn't know if IVF was going to be an option. I actually had a consultation. Our first consultation was in October 2019. So we've been at it like a year and a half now. And they told us that there was such thing where they could do testing to look for this duplication in embryos. And that was a whole process in itself. And like I said, because it was something that had never been done before, we had to have a probe created specifically to test for my genetic issue. Um, and insurance didn't cover that. So insurance was able to cover our egg retrievals, our transfers, medications, and blood work, ultrasounds, all of that. But ironically, they did not cover any of the genetics issues regarding IVF, even though that's my genes and I can't really change it. I was born with it. So that was one obstacle, was the financial aspect of going through that. So the first thing that they had to do was they had to get my DNA, and they had to have the DNA of my loss. And I didn't even know that hospitals kept that stuff. But apparently they keep the DNA from DNCs for like 30 years in storage. So I was able to get in touch with the hospital and have that sent over to the genetics lab, and they created a probe which cost us $3,000. And this was just to diagnose what it was, um, and to look for it. And then we had to pay another $3,000 to test up to 12 embryos. And we ended up doing 4 retrievals. The only other thing that wasn't covered was cryopreservation, which is where the process of freezing the eggs. So that was $1,000 every time that we did the retrievals, and we did 4 of those as well. So that in itself was, over $10,000, close to 15. Ultimately, we decided to go through with IVF because they were able to do the genetic testing. And even though it was a lot of money that we put into it and a lot of time, I mean, we've been on this journey for almost 2 years now, and we don't have a child to show for it just yet. We're, staying hopeful and positive. But the idea that we can one day have a child that is our own is absolutely everything to us, because I did not know how many women struggled with fertility until I became one of those women. And I give it up to all of the women that just keep pushing through. I've seen so many heartbreaking stories, and it's incredible what women can take mentally, physically, emotionally, all with our body. And ultimately we chose IVF because it gave us the option that we were looking for. And that is having a child that is both mine and my husband, and carrying it in my own body and being able to experience giving birth, even though I hear it's like really painful. Yeah, IVF is difficult, and it's difficult on a woman, on her body, on her mentality, and it's difficult on a marriage too. My husband and I, you lack that intimacy at that time because it's almost like you're doing everything to make sure that you are following what your doctor says, and it definitely created a strain on us. But we're great. My husband is so understanding, and he's patient. And with all the hormones that they were injecting in me, he was really great about it. He always made sure to comfort me, especially when I got really emotional. We've had two transfers already, and unfortunately, both of them have failed. And that in itself has created a lot of heartache on myself and on my husband. The first two egg retrievals that we ever did, we didn't get any unaffected eggs. All of the embryos that we made were affected. And it wasn't until the third retrieval that we finally got two unaffected embryos, one male and one female. And by the fourth retrieval, we ended up getting five unaffected embryos, three girls and two boys. And I swear by the CoQ10. So all the women out there, if you need help with your egg quality and the number of eggs that you're producing, quality, quantity, all of that, I swear by CoQ10, because the longer I was on it, the better quality my eggs were. If I had to change anything about my whole experience with this, it would have definitely been being more open with my family. In the very beginning, I wouldn't even tell them what the duplication was or what the issue was with my gene. One, because I felt like everybody was pitying me. My sister-in-laws got pregnant just by getting looked at by my brothers. And it was difficult to see that we were having so much trouble. But I interpreted it as them pitying me when really it was just them trying to be empathetic with me. So if I could change any one thing about my journey, it would have been including my family more. We tried so hard to not tell anybody about the transfers because we thought that they were going to work and we wanted to surprise everybody. And it was just letdown after letdown. And we didn't have anybody to talk to about that. None of my friends have fertility issues. It is just me. I don't have any friends, any family members that are going through what I'm going through with any form of infertility. So I really didn't have anybody that could relate to me. And it was really heartbreaking that it was just me and my husband dealing with it. And he's my best friend in the world. But it would have been so great for us if we would have been open with our families. And I encourage all women to be open with your families and let them in, because you need them more than you think you do in the good times and the bad times. It's so important to have a strong family connection when you're going through something as struggling as fertility. One thing that I would have told myself that I know now is that everything happens for a reason. When I suffered my loss, I took it as the world was against me, that I wasn't meant to be a mom. And turns out that the baby probably wasn't healthy, and that it was my body's way of letting me know that this is not a healthy pregnancy. I had really bad stomach pains all through my pregnancy, and I just kept pushing through when all of them were really signs. So I really truly believe that everything happens for a reason. Those two retrievals that didn't get any normal embryos, I feel like it happened for a reason. The transfers that didn't stick, I feel like it's all happening for a reason. And I feel like there is a greater plan and work here, and just to be patient and kind with myself most of all.